The morning after the fire, everything feels calm, but the silence weighs heavily. The lake looks like it's waiting for something that will never come. A person stands by the canoe for too long, watching the water and sky, feeling the consequences of their mistakes in the trembling of their body. Determined to move, they head back toward the trees, carrying a heavy duffel and tackle box. The dog follows eagerly, as if sensing the urgency to leave the area. Despite their determination, sharp pain shoots through their back, and the weight of the load becomes unbearable. They lean against a tree, gasping for breath, and realize they can't carry everything alone. Frustration bubbles up, mixed with resentment toward their father, whose decisions they blame for their current situation. Despite the anger, there's an aching desire for their father's reassurance and guidance. Looking at the dog, a loyal and strong companion, an idea forms. They decide to make use of the dog's strength. Removing their belt, they attempt to fashion it into a makeshift collar. The dog hesitates at first, wary of the unfamiliar item. With patience and gentle coaxing, the belt is fastened around the dog's neck. Though initially uncomfortable, the dog eventually adjusts, shaking off droplets of water and reluctantly accepting the new role. Next comes the challenge of attaching the duffel to the dog. Using a rifle strap and some rope, they create a harness. The dog resists at first, but, with firm encouragement, begins to pull the duffel. It's not a perfect system. Sticks and rocks catch the bag, tearing a hole at one point, but it's effective enough to make progress toward their destination. Exhaustion sets in as they finally reach the rock. Every muscle feels drained, and even simple tasks become difficult. Struggling with the belt, they eventually slide it off the dog's head, who responds with an energetic burst of wild running, bringing a much-needed moment of humor. As the dog settles, they unpack the duffel, grateful to find their clothes dry and the supplies intact. Though weary, a small sense of accomplishment lingers as they prepare to face what lies ahead. The supplies are laid out neatly: canned peaches, some salmon in a half-empty jar, 3 jars of water, and 2 empty jars. The empty jars are placed outside the shelter, ready to collect rain whenever it comes again. Pain pills sit next to the full jars, but only 4 are left. Despite the pain, the choice is made to save them for when they might be truly needed. Pain is nothing new here. The axe head is placed far from the sleeping area to avoid any accidents during the night. Other items are sorted through quickly: a wallet, keys, shampoo, deodorant, a hairbrush, a phone, a charger, and even a thriller from an airport bookstore. In the backpack, there's a notebook and pens, dismissed as useless for now, placed aside with the phone and other personal things. After tucking everything under the ledge, the tackle box is opened with effort. Inside, there's a small but valuable collection knife, flint and steel, fishing line, hooks and lures. The thought of needing a fishing rod sparks a brief moment of hope, but it fades when the fire-making kit is spotted. Fire means gathering wood and tinder, and the realization is overwhelming. Exhaustion and pain weigh too heavily. The body refuses to move and tears come freely. The effort to flip the canoe earlier now feels like a mistake, leaving too little energy for another task. The overwhelming truth hits hard: survival requires more than just finding leftover food. This is no longer about days or weeks, but possibly months. There is no rescue on the horizon, no one to count on but herself. Curled under the overhang, tears mix with the dirt on her face. The dog lies close, warm and steady, providing comfort without a single word. The realization that tools and supplies aren't enough sparks a shift. A plan is needed, something smart and sustainable. She acknowledges her limits but also her resourcefulness. With determination beginning to grow, she leans against the dog and whispers about the need for a plan, though exhaustion soon takes over. As rain begins to fall softly, the soothing sound fills the air. Pain throbs through her body, but the steady rhythm of rain offers a fragile sense of peace, pulling her into sleep. The plane disappeared into the distance, leaving a girl with a heavy feeling of isolation. A man nearby placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, but she flinched, startled and uneasy. He tried to reassure her, saying the plane would return with more supplies, but in the meantime they had work to do. Despite her resistance, he encouraged her to learn about their surroundings and responsibilities. Though frustrated, she reluctantly agreed, knowing she had little choice. The man started showing her their shelter. It was small, barely enough to move around in, but packed with supplies. There were rifles, tools, fishing equipment, preserved food, and other essentials for survival. While he explained each item's use, she found it hard to care. Her mind kept wandering, overwhelmed by the reality of being stuck in this remote place. Later, they walked along the lake, where a canoe lay upside down on the shore. The man pushed it into the water, encouraging her to help, but she hesitated, barely touching it. She felt disconnected, refusing to fully accept her situation. Still, they paddled out together, with him handling most of the work. Out on the water, he cast a fishing line, explaining the basics of survival. When the line jerked, signaling a catch, he urged her to reel it in. Nervous and unsure, she followed his instructions, feeling the tension of the fish fighting beneath the surface. Slowly, she pulled it closer, the rod trembling in her hands. Finally, a speckled fish emerged, flopping wildly in the canoe. The man quickly subdued the fish, striking it until it stopped moving. She watched, unsettled by the sight of blood and the finality of its death. It was her first experience seeing life taken so directly. When she murmured that it was just a fish, he agreed but added that it was an important one. He explained how survival meant taking life to sustain their own, urging her to feel thankful for the sacrifice rather than guilty. Despite her discomfort, hunger won out, and the idea of freshly cooked fish began to tempt her. As they paddled back, she prepared herself for the next lesson in survival, turning their catch into a meal. After coming ashore, the man pulled the canoe partially out of the water and assigned the girl a task to gather wood for a fire. She confidently replied that she could handle it and headed into the trees. She ventured far enough to avoid being directly visible, but stayed close enough to find her way back. As she collected sticks, she thought about their remote location and realized she had no idea how to guide anyone to where they were. While reaching for a branch, she heard a growl and froze. Turning, she saw the dog growling at something behind her. A hissing sound made her jump, expecting a snake, but instead, a porcupine scurried out. The dog's protective stance quickly shifted to calm once the danger passed. She praised him for potentially saving her from a painful encounter, gave him affection, and returned to the beach. Back at the camp, the man instructed her to sort the wood into piles by size. Tired and in pain, she suggested he handle it, and he reluctantly agreed, telling her to observe carefully. While trying to sit on a log, her weak leg gave out, and she fell hard, sparking intense pain. She silently endured the discomfort, refusing to cry. The man laughed, calling her clumsy, which sparked her frustration. She lashed out, reminding him that her injury required care and therapy, which she wasn't getting in the wilderness. His dismissive response about nature making her strong only fueled her anger. She retorted, highlighting his lack of involvement in her life and his ignorance about her condition. The conversation took a sharp turn when the man brought up religion, dismissing it as a tool of control. She countered with exaggerated claims of her past involvement in church, but the memory of her life with others brought up emotions she didn't want to confront. The tension lingered as the dog, oblivious to the argument, sought attention, and she bitterly questioned his behavior, wondering why he always licked her fingers. The conversation between the young person and the older man started with tension. The older man, working on a fire, explained a signal of submission from a dog and mentioned how long it took to train the animal. The younger one sarcastically commented that asking nicely might have worked better. The exchange became sharper when a muttered remark about divorce hit a nerve, causing the older man to flinch but continue building the fire. The younger individual, curious despite the tension, shifted closer to watch how the fire was started. The older man explained his method with a mix of anger and humor, demonstrating how sparks from a flint and steel could ignite bark and twigs. Slowly, flames grew, and he skillfully built the fire into a steady blaze. He then prepared a fish for cooking, tossing some scraps to the dog and keeping a few for future bait. As the fish roasted, he shared a story about the dog's origins, recounting how it was given to him as a pup to guard against bears. The younger person, trying to shake off boredom and frustration, stood and tested their injured leg, carefully aligning joints before taking steps. Despite the discomfort, memories of a determined physical therapist came to mind. The therapist's cheesy but motivational humor helped instill perseverance, even when the recovery felt overwhelming. Remembering a strategy to break free from negativity, the younger person snapped out of self-pity and decided to explore the surroundings. Walking along the beach, they admired the untouched beauty of the forest, the vibrant greens of the trees, and the symphony of bird calls. The wildness of the area stood in stark contrast to crowded campsites they had visited before. Inspired by the peaceful scene, they mimicked the upbeat tone of their therapist and declared they'd had enough of feeling down. Turning to the dog, they expressed their lingering frustration with their father but decided to return to the fire, ready to learn how to cook a fish. Despite the challenges, they found a glimmer of resilience and a willingness to adapt to the unfamiliar environment. He wakes up, feeling warmth on one side of his body, but the other side is frozen. Every muscle aches, and as he moves, he presses himself closer to his dog, Bo, hoping for comfort. Bo licks his cheek before getting up and trotting off into the clearing. He wants Bo to come back, but the dog is already gone. He stays curled up, holding his mom's photo in his hand, looking at her face as he tries to find comfort. He's cold, the dampness from the night rain still clinging to everything. He regrets not changing his clothes earlier, but if it wasn't for Bo's warmth, he might have frozen to death. He's lucky to have some food, water, and spare clothes, though everything is out of his reach, and he can barely move. It takes a lot of effort, but he gathers his strength and rolls onto his belly. With his arms, he drags himself over to the other side of the overhang, which is surprisingly dry, even after the rain. He notices his legs are still freezing and knows he needs to change into dry clothes. He grabs the jar of salmon, propping himself up with one arm, and takes a few bites. The fish is oily and salty, and it tastes amazing. He knows he has to eat slowly so it lasts, as he won't be moving much.